Well, good morning again, everyone. You'll be sick of me by the end of the session, I'm sure, but we'll get through it together. We're going to take the next couple of hours, but with a break for lunch at 12:30, just to work through the delegations and committee structures and terms of reference. Just watch the Hercules in retirement fly past, and it sort of reminded me that maybe some of your committees need to be retired as well and new ones put in place. So that's kind of the outcome we're hoping to get out of this section, is a decent conversation about what does fit for purpose look like for you guys. I've got a few slides, possibly more than needed, just to kind of set the scene around delegations committee structures. As I say, the purpose of the workshop is to have a good, decent conversation about what committee structures are the ones that you need now and looking forward into the next part of this year and possibly beyond that. I've identified, looking across LGNZ guidance in the delegations and committee structures, that some other regional councils have used some underpinning principles and guidance, which we can have a conversation about, discussion on the options for change, and then agree how we would give effect to any options you either want further explored or changes that you might want to make. So that's what we're going to be doing. As I say, the sort of next hour until lunch at 12:30, just working through sort of the basis upon which delegations are made, and have a look at kind of where you're at in terms of the organisation structure and the current arrangements. A little bit small, sorry, but as I say, that's the purpose of the workshop, is to have a conversation about the delegations and make some recommendations around decision making. It's a good time to do that now, because you've all been, councillors, some of you for quite a long time, but even the first timers have been here long enough to be able to make a kind of meaningful contribution to this conversation, and leaving it until the next triennium runs the risk that you'll have, some new members who won't understand, won't have been part of the business of decision making of council. So that's the reason we're having this conversation now. Just pulling out some LGNZ advice. It's about making life efficient and effective for council. It allows you to spread the load in terms of decision making to subcommittees or committees, which allows you to spend time on the big issues, the important issues, without it being kind of crowded out with business as usual type decision making that could occur in committees or subcommittees. Local Government Act provides that there's only certain things that you can delegate decision making to committees on, and I think the next slide has got a list of the things that can't be delegated, which will all be hopefully clear to you in terms of how things currently happen. I mean, I would note, and I do note in a later slide, that as currently constructed, the terms of reference don't generally delegate decision making, and that's something that I think we need to circle back on and have a conversation about.
So you were talking about delegations to subcommittees here, as opposed to delegations further down the line only.
Yes, that is the focus, but I would note, obviously, particularly around administrative delegations, the chief executive and on sub-delegations to GMs, is another whole bundle, and some regional councils kind of pulled all of that stuff together in a single manual, but the focus around this is just council. Just some types of decisions that can be delegated. Obviously, under the administrative, you've got all of your contracting and HR type delegations, financial, regulatory, legal. Reasons for delegating, as I say, it allows you to focus on the strategic matters. It allows some decisions to be made in a smaller setting, and what goes with that is it can allow for greater examination of the material before the decisions are made, and it helps manage the workload. Another slide on that. It also allows, through that sort of greater exploration, committees to become more expert in some areas, and it also allows for you to add expertise to those committees in order to help make decision making more robust, as well as providing opportunities for community to engage on specific topics, and to have obviously the ability to engage and input into that process of decision making. So I think looking at all of that, here's what I thought, might be some principles to hold in your mind and thinking about what, if anything, you might delegate. So efficiency and effectiveness, allowing council time to be spent on the matters which are important, and some of those matters we discussed this morning. Promoting engagement and consultation with community and stakeholders, supports and promotes engagement and participation, particularly of mana whenua, in decision making, and supports quality decision making in terms of the ability to engage with material and to have sufficient time to consider that before making decisions. I've got a what else there because there may well be things in councillors' minds that should be added to that list. I might just pause to see if there are some additional matters. Kate?
Just checking with 3, promotes engagement and consultation with community and stakeholders. Totally want to have that, but that's actually counterintuitive potentially to 1, because at the first time a matter is coming up, it's delegated to that committee to decide, then there isn't, and a community group wants to come and challenge that thinking, they don't have a chance if you've delegated that for you to reconsider that before it comes to the committee, to the council for confirmation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
A good point, and something just to hold on to when we get to talk about what might be in terms of reference, in terms of the guidance that you would give to your committees about what does good decision making look like, and it could easily cover ensuring that there's adequate and robust consultation and engagement before decision making occurs.
And potentially that's using workshops in a different manner than we use now.
All right, so I'm assuming just that those few principles is enough to just park for now. These are your current committees, ORC committees, as I understand it, and indicating where you've got external members appointed as well, and you've also got some joint committees, the regional transport one, and civil defence and emergency management group, which are mandated by different statutes. As I noted, before, just looking at your terms of reference, most of your ORC committees don't have any decision-making rights. Finance does to an extent, and the joint committees have some statutory delegated decision-making to them. So one of the kind of key questions really is that consistent with efficient decision making? If in effect, a committee is considering matters which it has actually no ability to take a decision on, it still has to come to council. Does that lead to sort of double handling? What next? New structure in the organisation. So one of the issues is getting alignment between committee structures and the GMs that are leading parts of the organisation, and whether that, you know, lines up in terms of the ability to be able to engage with committee chairs, co-chairs. So question, just, and we're happy to kind of flick back to your current committee structures, but I'm picking that these are reasonably well held in your heads. You know, what are fit for purpose? You know, other joint committees obviously probably quite hard to unwind, so maybe you leave those alone. Just trying to identify if we could kind of rule out any of the current committees so that we can hear about which ones we're focusing on, you know, what changes and updates to current committees might you want to make, and what's likely to be needed now or parked for the new triennium. What are the options to change? So I might just pause there and circle back to that first question. Thoughts?
Finance and audit and risk would be very hard to change either of those.
And I think that makes sense.
If I went back to the principles, and sorry, I'm slow, so I've only just thought of two that I would have, and they may be covered in your mind, but they weren't in mind. They were transparency of the work program, and I really appreciate what Richard's done in the reporting that you do at finance. We get a lot of that stuff really clearly reported in financial terms. We don't necessarily get all of our work programs reported annually as actions. And I think that's a role that it means that people can't see with any clarity everything that we're doing. We talked about that one page this morning, is understanding what we do. And I think that would be good to have somewhere that most work streams are reported on. And they probably are, but not in a systematic way that's similar. And the only other one is certainty and timeliness as principles. And the reason I say that is that if you've got a council committee that may not be signed off for some time, that lack of clarity, you think you've almost got there over the line, but I think people want to know that you've made a decision once and the staff can move on rather than waiting 2, 3, or even 5 weeks until they can get that signed off. Which I think is it's those principles which are important, but I think you've probably covered that off in efficiency, but I think it needs to be possibly more clarity.
Yeah. And the current arrangements, as I understand it, the current committee structures, there's not one clear GM that's responsible for the work program. So I kind of ideally, I think it would work better for committees and for the staff if you had at least a lead GM. Richard, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you know, in an ideal where that alignment would be closer than what it is currently, and it also speaks to the feedback that we've had around better communication between GMs and co-chairs on issues, and having a key owner of issues within a committee just makes that communication simpler as well. So yeah, I mean, from an efficiency point of view, from a relationship point of view, and even the ability to report on work programs sort of consistently within a committee and then ideally across committees, some alignment with the GM structure. It may not be perfect, but you know, close would be helpful.
Yeah, and so other than finance and audit and risk, what I'm hearing is everything else kind of can go on the table for discussion. Alan?
Yeah, I would have thought it makes good sense, as we do now, to have a dedicated transport committee, because that's quite a defined role. So I would have included that one in there.
Great.
All right, but we might revisit the terms of reference and that kind of key issue of whether any of these committees are going to have decision-making powers. Yeah. I mean, what's the what's been the experience of council within the current structure without that sort of delegated decision-making authority in terms of the risk of double handling. And Richard, you know, the experience of staff in that regard as well.
Yeah, am I going first even
No.
though you asked me second?
I'm interested in councillors, you know, experience, so that as members of committees, and then as full council members dealing with the same matters, is there double handling, or is it, you know, when it comes back to the full council for decision making, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a relitigation of what was the conversation that's already been had in a committee.
I will go first. So it's an administrative, it's a tick box exercise, and I do, and Amanda's probably a better place to speak to this. There's potentially some legal risk in the way we do that currently, where we effectively just carry through approvals from previous minutes of committees for council just to sort of mass approve what was decided at a committee meeting without the papers and the material to consider it.
Right.
So that's one thing to think about. From a staff point of view, I mean, we just, while we're writing reports, have to constantly remind ourselves that we can't actually seek decisions from committees, which is why you see those strange resolutions around, you know, recommend to council or note and suggest council signs off, whatever else. It's just another step in the process. And the committees are of the whole, you know, with some additions of key mana whenua reps and audit and risk with Andrew. So it's still the council effectively as the decision-making body at those committees. But I mean, I'm happy for the other GMs and Amanda to sort of jump in and offer some views on it as well. That would be valuable.
I think the only other thing I'd add is that due to the way the delegations are framed, I think there's also some issues that just come straight to council, so they don't go through the committee for timeliness or because, well, largely would be because to get it through the committee, you're looking at a 3-month planning process, whereas sometimes we don't have that time up our sleeve. So it means that the co-chairs and the committees perhaps lose that opportunity to have that first look at it, but obviously still have that opportunity to look at it at council.
Doug Shearer. Yeah. So, yeah, probably to that comment, Amanda, though, that once we've done our annual plan and set our OPEX and operations for the year, the only things that should be actually coming up are things out of the ordinary, like either emergencies or sudden government changes or the likes, which would actually necessitate a straight to council anyway. So I just don't, because yeah, once we've set our annual plan, leisure work program gone, we should be probably just heading away and doing our policy. But
yeah, although I think probably an example would be, for example, the biodiversity strategy that is an annual plan and the workshops being done with the ESP committee. Approval to consult has to be given by council, so that can't be given by the ESP committee, and looking at the work program to work through the issues with the ESP committee then doesn't leave enough time to go back to ESP for approval with the material to get approval to consult on, so that ESP can consider it and then council can tick it off. So that's just an example of whereas the ESP committee had the delegation to approve consultation on work plan issues in the annual plan, then that would be a more straightforward trajectory for that decision making.
yeah, only relative to your timing though. If it was in sync, it wouldn't actually matter. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, approval to consult.
Gary, you're looking like you want to say something.
Oh no, it's just your chair. Or yeah. For me, doesn't there have to be an overall decision maker? Our electors elect us to create 12 overall decision makers collectively as council. And I sort of had always been of the impression that, well, the buck stops with council. So you, everything that happens underneath council, whether it's subcommittees, whether it's our committee structures or whatever, all aligns towards that final decision making. And for some aspects, we do rattle through the end results of where committees have arrived at and we tick box them off. For other aspects, they are well fleshed out in committee and then are re-fleshed out in full council for a final decision, but then they can be very big decisions. So for the committee structure we've had, I've actually found it to be quite effective because I think it is quite ring-fenced into the specific sort of areas like public and transport, safety and resilience. I found that to be working really well. Finance is always going to be ring-fenced for itself. Audit and risk, it is always going to have that one professional member that I would have thought all audit and risk committees across any corporate organisation would have that one professional member to assist them. So I thought, well, from my impression, we had the committee structure largely right, and it seemed to be working quite effectively.
Yep.
It's me, thanks.
Councillor Elliott
Okay.
Weir has his hand up.
Where?
Elliot's online.
Oh, Elliot?
I'm happy to wait, but I always just come back to, I think there was a moment last year, I'm not sure, where we had a decision in a committee, but it wasn't a decision because it was a recommendation to full council. But it was something fairly time sensitive, and so it went ahead and happened, and then it came to us as a recommendation, and it was sort of a bit confusing because it wasn't really clear. The decision had already been made, even if not rubber stamped, and had been carried out essentially, and we were almost retrospectively approving it, and that didn't sit great with me. And I understand what I think, I couldn't actually see who was saying it earlier around when our annual plan is set out, we should sort of have that time to make sure that any decisions that would need to be made are made in time. But it does seem like stuff, just I guess running a big organization, stuff comes up, and we have to deal with it as it does come up. I don't know if that can be avoided. If it can, I'd love to see that happen. But yeah, I highly doubt that can be avoided with things just coming up. And whether they all just need to come to a full council meeting doesn't seem like the most efficient thing necessarily. So I think that's why I'd probably want to see some more of those powers delegated to those committees so that those decisions can be made without it needing to be then retrospectively officially made in a full council meeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it picks up Gary's issue. So the separation point is decisions which are routine and necessary for the efficient, operation of the organisation, as distinct from large, policy change decisions or large decisions around, the annual planning or long-term planning cycle. And to your point, Gary, I mean, the Local Government Act does allow for decisions to be delegated or certain decisions to be delegated, but council remains overall responsible for those decisions. And of course, council can change, the delegations in terms of reference, at any time. But to be clear, what you're doing is, and as I say, it may only be in relation to relatively straightforward, day-to-day decisions that are necessary to keep the organisation functioning efficiently, as opposed to, big rock decisions. But as I say, at the moment, most of your committees don't have any decision-making powers.
Can I just add, sorry, Dog, I think you've set up a dichotomy there of these day-to-day decisions and then the big ones, whether it's, I don't know, government stepping in somewhere or some emergency or something. I do feel like there are a lot of decisions in between that on a spectrum. It feels like there are sort of decisions that come up that feel maybe somewhat day-to-day, but there may be some differences of opinion around council on whether that is. So I just wanted to put that out there that, yeah.
Yeah, and that comes almost to the role of the the kind of chair and committee members to be able to make excellent judgments around, regardless of their terms of reference, what council would expect to be sent up and what council would be quite comfortable. I think that's how you sort that, you know, it's not a mathematical dichotomy. I know what you're saying, Elliot, but it goes to, I guess, the sophistication in the chairing and deputy chairing or co-chairing and membership arrangements. I think Kevin was first and then you, Tim.
So just going back to what Elliot was saying on that issue, I sort of vaguely recall it, but so a committee approved it, then we had to subsequently then backdate the approval by council. With the change, so we're talking situations that are all of a sudden time bound and come to us. What I would wonder if we are really using the ability now of Zoom, of digital meetings, and that if something let's say it comes from government, we've got to make a decision through the new environmental delivery program. It might be something on pests or something. And if we had that, which is again a committee of the whole, you know, why wouldn't, if we then had to do a paper that went to council, so we had to confirm it, we've passed a resolution and we have to do we need a wee bit more information or whatever, but we're happy. So why couldn't we just have an extraordinary Zoom meeting to do that? Is that too dramatic, or because we're only talking about very
inefficient? There's a lot of work even in an online extraordinary meeting. Like it's not an efficient way to operate to say every time we need a snack council. We meet monthly, so there's not many times where you need an extraordinary meeting within a month. I think. Yeah,
so we're shuffling around for an absolute rarity then, aren't we? Because it's a meeting, you know, one of those committee meetings has got to be within that monthly cycle. It'd only be a hiccup if it came the meeting before, if you know what I mean, and we couldn't get it onto the council paper. But then you've got the power to put something onto the council paper anyway. So we had a finance meeting this morning, and we moved a motion that was time sensitive, that the council meeting a month later would be too late for it. Have you not got the power, or the chair got the power to put that paper onto the council meeting for approval that day?
Well, yeah, we can.
We did do that sometimes in the past.
Process. There's two conversations here. There's the delegation conversation, which is always, you know, there's different opinions on that, and then there's the structure conversation.
Yeah.
And my sense is that if the efficiencies for me come in structure, delegations are secondary. Delegations would be great. I think that it builds some, I don't want to, credibility is not quite the right term, but it gives those committees a sense of purpose when there is actually decisions, and maybe the threshold is, you know, annual plan, where it's just approving how we progress something that's already in the annual plan, versus it's something new and therefore council needs to take a strategic decision about whether it is a priority and we should be treating it that way. So it might come through committee, but ultimately still has to be decided by council. But the efficiencies, and going right back to the conversation at the start around how do we structure it, how do we get the work program developed, how do we ensure that councillors feel those areas that you have some ownership of in terms of your co-chair roles are really well informed about what's going on, and what is the plan and what are the current issues. That's where I think the benefits are for me. I think delegations is a separate conversation to structure, and there are some things that could be achieved through delegation that would make it that would just improve the way we work. But I guess I just don't want to miss the other opportunity because we're so focused on whether or not we should be delegating decision making to a committee.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Gretchen, then Alan, and then Kate.
I could tell you had.
Oh, sorry, Tim.
I think this is all about a process, and it's about a process of dealing with detail and expertise. I don't think any committee should really have the decision-making powers. They should always have be responsible for making recommendations to council. I'm not, I realise that the finance committee has a $2 million approval of some expenditure, but in the time that I've been here, and I don't know if others that have been here longer, we haven't seen that authority undertaken in any way at all. Some of the discussion around here is about exceptions. You know, what if they don't happen much, and so I think we can really just keep this simple. The committees deal with the detail. They have the expertise to have the proper discussion, and then they make the recommendations through. Just keep it simple. It's working. I agree with Gary. I don't think it's broken.
I think it's moved on from my question. I'm okay at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alan?
On the delegation issue, and of course, yes, we must get onto the structure too. My view is that where there are committees of the whole, we should delegate as much as we possibly can. And yes, I see that sense of purpose, but also just that it just simplifies things. And I know we've had some discussion around, all right, it doesn't happen very often around timing issues, but that can happen, and it is just creating extra work. And I hear Rich talking about the risk of rubber that you lay yourself open to if you are sort of just rubber stamping without coming to those full information. So yes, I would think my view is delegate whatever we can. I hear what Gary has said about one decision-making body, and I understand that. And I suppose that then comes back to this decision, though I know it's not a decision today, but this delegation decision. So in some ways, there is one decision-making body, which is the council, and we will be making a deliberate decision about what to delegate. So I think that sort of covers that.
Thanks, Alan. Kate, and then Elliot.
I really want this to make sense, not just to us around the table, but to our community. And I think if we look at our long-term plan where we spent hours doing strategy, if we look at how we've set that up, say even regional leadership, we've got a heading under there, really regional leadership, but it doesn't necessarily translate particularly well to the delegations in our regional leadership committee. And I think if we looked at those headings, it gives us a really good guide. But I would break down some of those headings, like environment. I deal with the planning aspects of the environment differently than I would to say biodiversity and biosecurity, which are in there. I think the long-term plan give us a really good guidance. And the one committee that I definitely think needs to be split is science and policy. I think science comes before policy, and we need to inform to start setting some principles for policy. And I think we've had them absolutely understandably because of the staff structure we had. We've changed that staff structure, but we haven't changed the committee. Delegations, it doesn't have to be yes or no, it can be part. And I think an exception space is a really healthy way of looking at that. And even if we've got the delegation, it may be that the first vote is that we do not accept that delegation, that we take it to council. And the reason I would say that we would consider doing that is where it's a matter that's coming to the agenda for the first time, as I said earlier, that the community actually come up and front up and say, we don't like this report. And we need to sometimes give ourselves time to reconsider a report if it's the first time, rather than just accepting that because you've got a delegation. So I think if you're grown up and nuanced on this stuff and mature enough to have that debate at the right level, then it can be worked through. So the local government New Zealand, I mean, you've got part A, part B or part C matters that you can deal with your agenda in separate ways. How does it work with part C or part? Yeah.
I think that's the way DCC, for example, used to give delegations to the committees. There was type A delegations, which meant the committee had the full delegated responsibility, and then B issues were ones that the committee could consider but had to push to council for the final decision.
And some I just noted. Anyway, so I think the structure, because we consulted on our structure to assume it's in the long-term plan, we should look at that as a guiding way that we do it personally.
Elliot.
Yeah, sorry, more of a question than a comment, although well, no, both actually, sorry. The comment is just that I think if situations were arising where a recommendation from committee was coming to council, and we were having new discussions around that. That to me would sort of signal that the process up to that committee decision maybe hadn't been as fully fleshed out as we would have liked. And I think that would probably point to, you know, I don't know, maybe needing a workshop before that committee decision or something like that, rather than needing the council decision at the end as a backstop, I guess. Unless, you know, new information came to light or something like that, but that's a sort of separate matter. I was just sort of curious around I think maybe Gary and Tim's comments in particular, but I guess all councillors, and I was just curious if there were any specific concerns around giving delegations to committees. Were there any risks that we were particularly worried about, or anything bad that could happen with that?
Well, I think the risk, Elliot, is the one you identified, which is at the full council level, you become aware of decisions that you would have thought full council should have been taking, but delegated authority has been used by committee to make the decision. And I think my suggestion is maybe we should just focus the conversation in the first instance on what committees. I'm keen to have the conversation about looking at the organisation structure, whether the current committees are the right ones. And somebody was UK just saying, you know, maybe you could split policy, put it with strategy, and put the science, you know, possibly together with resilience as the organisation is structured, and that might bring some efficiencies for GMs and their team. So my suggestion is let's have a conversation about that. Just park delegations for now, because one of the things you could do is actually ask the committees themselves to think about and consider and start, you know, the sorts of stuff that's coming to the committees with that question kind of at the forefront. Is this something which, if we had a delegation, we could exercise decision making, and it wouldn't be, you know, wouldn't be that issue that Gary, you're talking about and you're talking about, Elliot?
Yeah, are we thinking at all about, like, I don't know, reducing the number of people in the committees or anything? Just because at the moment we're all on, other than audit and risk, which is the one that has delegations anyways, we're all on all of the committees, and so I just don't see what the risk would be if we're all reading our committee, you know, papers and stuff, and coming to those meetings, that we wouldn't see something not coming to a full council meeting.
Mana Whenua aren't on all committees, so aren't on council.
No, but we're all on, like, yeah, everyone who's in the full council is also on all of the committees other than audit and risk. So there's not like a risk of us not seeing something in a committee that doesn't go to full council or something like that.
And unless you weren't there, because you know, most of the committees have quorum that is less than the full council.
So I guess, Elliot, in terms of the concept, it was the decision made at the start of the training, it was the same as the one before, with the exception of audit and risk, all committees are of the whole, and we haven't heard anything to suggest there was an appetite for anything different. So it hasn't been on our radar in terms of any of the thinking we've been doing.
Yep. So bearing that in mind, sorry, Kevin.
Oh, yeah, look, I just think delegations is the last part we should be talking about. We've got six directors that I think we should be lining up somehow with what they're actually doing. So that's changing our current structure to suit the people, probably with the exception of regional plan and transport, which there seems to be a desire to have two, but that director might be happy to have two committees. But
Got three now, so two's less.
yeah, but if you know what I'm saying, yeah, you know, I just wonder, and then the first move of that would be once we've set what part goes with what part, we would then transfer the appropriate delegations to those committees, then see what that looked like. And then the next step would be trial that to see how it goes, I would think.
Yeah,
That makes them.
In taking a kind of less is more approach, and as you say, just kind of see what works and don't overreach to start with.
Yeah. So with that in mind, what I'd probably need to ask staff really what is the best fit to take from to rearrange existing committees into the 6 or 7 categories that we've got. And have you done that exercise, and can we put that one?
Yeah, so we have taken a look at it, and we've asked some questions that I think would help that discussion. So things like, does the Science and Policy Committee still make sense, or would we be would it align better to take science out of, to split those 2 committees and have more and join science and safety and resilience together? So you've got a safety and resilience, or science and resilience committee alongside a handy GM portfolio of safety and science and resilience. And then I guess the other question we've talked about is, currently we've got environmental planning, RMA planning, in the Science and Policy Committee, and we've also got it in the Regional Leadership Committee a little bit with some of the strategy development, and then we've got environmental delivery in the Environmental Delivery Committee, but also a little bit of the biosecurity planning in that committee. So I think if you looked across those 3 committees, we could align better the environmental, the planning and policy making, and the sort of the functional environmental strategies. So things like air strategy and biodiversity strategy, which currently are split across different committees, and then evaluating those committees is also split across different committees. So we've done a bunch of thinking. They're the kind of key questions we've asked ourselves, and we'd be happy to write that up or share that, depending on the appetite around the table.
Yeah, look, to me, that's the starting point, because that gives the functionality of what's going to happen. And what we actually call the committee becomes less of a dynamic. It's got to fit in with what we're doing, doesn't it?
So we've had those conversations. We've deliberately not put that on slides, because it was quite important for us to actually, it's your committee structure.
Yeah.
So what we didn't want to do is slap up slide 1, here's staff's preference. Let's have a talk about what's not right.
Yeah.
But we have done that thinking, and it is based on alignment to the GM portfolios, which won't be a surprise.
Yep.
And if there was a desire to see that staff thinking, there's no reason we can't whack it together over a lunch break, so you can at least see where we've got to.
We've got a whiteboard or something, or
Yeah,
it's
fairly straightforward.
Can we agree what we need to keep? I mean, that's part of this process, isn't it? So that might make it easier if we can just do that before lunch, perhaps.
Yeah, and interesting, based on the comments that were made earlier, so there was very limited change recommended to Finance Committee, Audit and Risk Committee, or the Public and Active Transport Committee.
So
where we saw more alignment was in those other 4 committees that currently cover a range of different things.
Yeah. So if we can agree that those 3 committees are okay, then we can move on. So
we're focusing on the 6 that are left, right?
6 left.
6.
Oh no, because finance and
It's,
risk, so the five that are left. Currently, environmental science and policy, environmental implementation, public and active transports, a tick. So regional leadership and safety and resilience.
Yep.
So as Amanda said, the staff have done some thinking. I'll put you on the spot. Do you want to share that maybe after the lunch break? Because it works through each of those 5 committees just with some suggestions.
So if you know the rough GM structure, we wouldn't be proposing a corporate committee as such. I mean, Tammy's got responsibility for functions that report through audit and risk and will turn up at council from time to time, but it's not a committee that we need to create. So and then the balance of it is environmental deliveries, we're actually pulling all of our delivery together under one committee, so we don't, at the moment, we've got regulatory and regional leadership and environmental implementation goes to a separate committee, so all of those delivery functions come through a single committee. Science and resilience, so separating science out from policy, and effectively all of those teams, environmental monitoring, hazards, engineering, science, all the data that drives our organisation would come through a single committee in the planning side. And then, as Amanda referred to, pulling strategy and planning together. So we've got a single committee that's focused on that front end planning that the organisation does, both in terms of strategies, which aren't necessarily driven by legislation, but still form, I guess, that at the the front end of everything we do, along with our resource management planning. So you'd end up with finance and audit and risk, public and active transport, effectively no change with to be looked at. Regional leadership still stays. That's for all the governance, the communications, where we have those things like the Te Kurawai audit or the community survey that we do every couple of years. So that still needs a home, and regional leadership is a good space for that. Just that we remove the regulatory components from that. So regional leadership, environmental delivery, science, resilience, strategy and planning. Names to be confirmed. That would be roughly what it would look like. And you'd end up with that across finance and audit and risk, and you'd see quite a bit of Tammy in there. Public and active transport would be Anita, strategy and planning, be a combination of Anita and Amanda. Regional leadership, largely Amanda. Environmental delivery, Joe. Science and resilience, Tom. That's the alignment with your GMs.
Put that on a piece of paper, please.
Yeah, we can do that in the break and just pop it back up on a slide so that you can kind of see it. But that sounds right. I mean, Richard, you're talking about strategy and planning. Those two things get together. Where does policy go?
It's
spread across. Or...
Yeah, I just didn't want to call it strategy policy planning because it's
It's
just
not
a mouthful.
in there.
Too many people.
Right.
Yeah. So, Richard, sorry, that, yeah. So we've got Amanda as strategy and customer. Is that right? I've got that right. It's pretty good. So where does the customer part of that for him
Regional leadership.
goes into readers? So you're going to be a bit split. So, some of them will be.
Oh, there's no, it's not perfect alignment.
No, that's it's cool. That's all right. Yep.
I think the discussion we had is that having the strategy sit along the policy and planning, as those high, if you call them higher order documents, made good sense. And then obviously there's elements in Amanda's area that would still fall through to regional leadership, which is in your customer space and communication space and governance.
Yep. Cool.
Gretchen?
Apart from public and active transport being out on its own, it used to be under finance and corporates, the model that ORC had for many years. It doesn't make sense. It's just a basic, it just does make sense. Yeah. You have science and engineering together, technical, and all the rest of it just is pretty standard, I would think. Yeah.
Alexa?
I think there's a bit of a worry that the public and active transport doesn't always talk well with the regional transport committee, and somehow some way of bringing those two together I think would be a good idea. And we also possibly need to think about, do we still like that regional transport committee and how it is combined with Southland? Just throwing that out there.
Can I just say that RTC is the one committee that we're required by legislation to have, so we have to have that one. It doesn't have to be with Southland, but we do have to have it as its own committee.
Should public transport come under there? I don't know.
I don't know that Invercargill wants to be bogged down with our.
No, it won't. That's why it has to be considered the whole thing. Within, is that still serving us? I'm just putting it out there. Is it serving us? I don't have a view at the moment, except that sometimes it is a little bit tricky communicating between the two when we need to.
Sorry, my observation would be they're quite separate focuses around, foci around public transport. One's more of a planning, regional planning, and the other one's more about the operation and planning and delivery of public transport. Kate?
I'm just going to put it out there, a bit like Alexa throws up straw man, about the non-regulatory reporting to us from the community. Now, I mean, the most beautiful time that I think we have as councillors is going out in the field and seeing what's happening out in the community. And we often have people presenting to us either at public forum or at presentations, but I don't think we make it particularly easy for that to happen or intuitively go out trying to see what that is. We're about to start a substantial funding stream that I think should embed in not this an informal way of reporting back what is happening out in the field or could be happening in the field to inform that decision making and to account at a low level about that. And I'm just putting it out there that I think non-regulatory reporting sometimes with the community and giving it a space and almost honouring their contribution is something that we could do better. So I'm just putting it out there. I don't know where it would sit.
I'll just test
Mhm.
how we could do it better and how we don't make it easy. Any group that comes to us to present, we make a space for them at the front of the relevant meeting. So I'm just, if we're gonna say that, what is it that you want us to do?
So it's about, if they come to us and ask us, we will do that, absolutely. There are a lot of groups out there doing fantastic work that that don't know about that system or don't have that relationship to do it. And if we normalize it and or gave them time to have a voice. I don't know, I think there's a potential there. I'm not being critical of what we've got. I think that trip out to the forest and bird site of Catlins, you know, they've been going around for ages and but they haven't bedded down into things. There's so many good community stuff happening that I think sometimes giving them a voice in a public forum where they can be seen more broadly is a really healthy thing that they don't always have. I mean, God forbid, the ODT can't cover everything nowadays anyway. And it's about lifting them up a bit and giving that. I have sat around this table where people just want presentations over and done with because we've got a full agenda and we just really want to push on. And this is about not giving them on top of a existing agenda, which may be heavy and take hours, and our minds are really in the subsequent papers, but actually giving them that voice in a public space.
So the improvement you're looking for is more time available.
Yeah, probably for that, and in a positive way, and in a structured way, and so you may do it by area geographically or by themes that informs our delivery and our investment.
Yeah,
it's not a criticism. I just think I think there's some groups who certainly know how to come and present to us really, really well and do it frequently, and there's others that don't and feel empowered. But I'm happy to be criticised. It's a straw man, as I said.
Direction?
Lloyd was before me, I think. Yep.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with the way, how the discussion's going. I think it's imperative that our committee structure is linked into the work programs, into how the ELT operates, and I think I'm very much, I think we need to be working together, so that's the first step. And there's always going to be some crossovers, but we've got to have the key themes coming through in the committee structure, and we can talk about delegations later on. But I think it's the first step, and I think it's a step that we should be implementing relatively quickly.
Thanks, Lloyd. Question?
I think on Kate's one, it's the as well, the formalised groups that we do. They're not groups, they're funding arrangements that we have, like catchment communities, and what else might there be? Different ones. Some, it is a little bit unstructured how we report back at the moment annually. So we probably could tighten up on how that happens. Some community groups will like coming to the council and doing a formal presentation. Some probably wouldn't like that so much as just having it presented as a table or whatever, and we've met these criteria or however as well. So but some sort of formalised way of reporting back on what could be increasing large arrangements with other groups to deliver for us, and ensuring that that is all ticked off well probably as a point, yeah. And also making more space for those that do want to come along and present is a good point too. Maybe not always through committees
Yeah,
either,
no,
but just,
yeah.
yeah, thinking about that.
I just carrying on from that, I think it's a role as a councillors to talk to our community groups, to encourage their participation and encourage, you know, as a councillor in a community, we should be going to their meetings, going, you know, being visible in the areas and then bringing it back to the council table and, you know, most definitely offering the opportunity to share the information, but yeah, it's probably, you can't, I think we got to offer the trough to the horse, but you can't make it'll only drink when it's thirsty. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's about adapting how you engage for the purpose that you're wanting to get that engagement and the nature of the groups that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I probably don't see it as part of our committee strategy as opposed to our part of our overall strategy of the whole ORC, and you know, that just that commitment to working with our communities and continue our improvement with our community relationships, and it'll all just develop over time. It's something you can't make happen. It's something that will develop over time. But we all get that trust between each other going good.
Gary.
Thanks. I actually really like Kate's point, but I think it's all about the structure and how we set it up. And for our council meetings, if we always had one presentation slot available, that might be 15 or 20 minutes. And then I don't want to be summoning in groups that would just pay to be wasting their day to travel to Dunedin to come here just for a 20-minute slot. But if that was always available, those groups would know that with agreement with us, that they could come and present in that one slot, and they can't get in this council meeting like the next one or whenever it might be. I just wonder whether that could be a better way to further expand what we can hear from them that you don't really get in the 5 minutes of public forum.
Good point. I'm just conscious that lunch, Kylie, is available now, and it feels like just a pause now to allow us to retrofit, you know, what we just talked about in terms of like the proposed committees and what might sit under those committees, and then after lunch we can share that back with you and tweak that if it's not quite right. Is 1 o'clock enough time for council to have lunch? We reconvene at 1. We're set to go through till 2:30, but my gut feel is we might not need, you know, more than half an hour after lunch to tick this off. Okay. Yep.
Are we able to bring forward annual plan if we get ahead of time? Is that something we can do?
That's got to be done annually.
We can touch base with the team.
Yeah,
touch base, I
that'd
think.
be good.
2026.
I'm sure everyone wants to.
We do next year's one, Tom.
Okay.
So I have a half hour, Elliot, Alexa.
Okay, Elliot, Lexi, can you hear? Okay, good, excellent. Right, so I think good conversation, and it unpicked some of the complexity around committees and delegations, and I think the collective decision was let's just park delegations for now, let's get committees structured up so they align as best they can with the current organisational structure. So in the break, Amanda has furiously worked across some of the responsibilities that would sit under the new committees. So I'm proposing, unless there's any opposition, that we just work through the new committees with their responsibilities, just picking up comments as we go. And it probably is going to take us about half an hour, and then I think some moves have been made to bring some of your afternoon agenda items forward. Am I right on that front, or?
We've sent them all a message.
Right.
Haven't actually had confirmation, but hopefully.
Let's wait and see. So I think, Amanda, you're going to share.
All right. I haven't updated that first page notice. So I'm just gonna make sure I've got the right version. Apologies. Try that. Try that again. So we have, I guess, a couple of things before we work through it. One is that this is quick workings based on some of the early thinking we've done and listening to the conversation just before lunch. If the broad shape of this looks acceptable or looks like something you would like to pursue, we'll need to go away and just do a bit of thinking, because there'd be some implementation impacts. Like Tom's raised, for example, bringing science into the Safety and Resilience Committee would mean that those, I think he said for the next round, that would be a committee with 18 papers. So we'd need to potentially look at meeting schedules and just make sure that we've got the cadence of meetings under the new structure correct, and that we've got the right sort of time allocated and all of those sorts of things. So I guess this is the first look at it, and then yeah, we'd need to do some further implementation work.
So would that become a common ploy with that grouping, or would we have to?
Sorry.
Yeah, but Amanda, so you're going to have 18 papers or something by making that combination, that join, would that become a common scenario, or?
Tom can speak.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's probably a bit of a perfect storm for the next committee round. But in saying that, if we were continuing to report in the way that we are at the moment, it would be quite a high paper load. There are some things we can do to look at combining those reports to reduce the number or volume of them, and perhaps doing omnibus reports or bits and pieces that help to share progress or things that are now available for the public and all of that sort of thing. So we could think differently about it. And I don't think it's a fundamental reason not to go down that path in terms of committee.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies, I'm just having some version control issues, but I think myself sorted.
It's not the one you sent me that I could send back to you.
Just reopening my.
Just what I mean is work on that. As a general note, we have struggled, I would say, probably in the past 18 months to just manage agenda volumes. You'll all be familiar with the fact that we sort of set a couple of hours and probably end up with, really tight towards the end of meetings or and almost rushing papers through. So there's some thinking for us to do, and that's another conversation between co-chairs and GMs just around what papers need to be on there and how long do they need on the agenda to have a really sound discussion on them. Those that warrant it versus those that are more noting papers, and if the papers are read, there should be very little time required to discuss them at a meeting. So there's also agenda management there. We report a lot of stuff. Some of the update reports we provide, they are really valuable because it's good to get the messages out there around the work that's going on. There's a question around, do they have to be formal committee reports versus updates provided another way and all the material made public for people as well. So there's other ways we can think about managing the volume of information that flows through committees and council, because you've all, or a number of you rightly pointed out, we can regularly be up in the high hundreds, if not thousands of pages of stuff, depending on what's being reported. So, there's a little bit of thinking for us to do there as well. And, but noting that it is still important that we think about what the public does need to know. If we're not taking it to committees, then how are we making sure it's available for people?
All right, apologies for my version control issues. So if we start at the Regional Leadership Committee, and it's small, isn't it? It's bigger. The primary change to this committee would be to take out the regulatory functions, which currently sit in Joe's area. So all that quarterly reporting on compliance and consent and harbour master activities would come out of there. We would also take out the submission review and RPS monitoring and the urban development work. And we would take out, yes, I've already mentioned the regulatory group reporting, and I've just added in customer to your point, Kevin, so that would, just reflect that communications, governance and customer oversight of the partnership with Kaitahu, and the currently, and this is something we'd potentially need to think about, but the left in the climate change mitigation responses, but I think the regional strategies and plans should come out. And the reason for that is climate sits across all of our work programs. The Resilience Committee has got a lot of natural adaptation work. We could align climate mitigation with that work as well. And in terms of climate mitigation, the things I'm thinking about are the things that are sitting in my area around carbon reporting for the organisation, alliances with other TAs in terms of working on climate change. But if we put that in the Resilience Committee, it I guess bundles climate all together, whereas really it's across everything. And this will be the committee that I sit over, so it gives me alignment with the work that my group's doing and reporting that to council. So that's currently regional leadership. And then if we move on to Finance Committee, feedback. It's a good point. So,
Anybody, that all seemed pretty straightforward. Does anybody want to test, comment?
Yep.
Elliot?
Yeah, just on the climate change stuff, just wanted to clarify whether that's also including the South Dunedin future stuff, because that sort of sits slightly separately from our other climate change strategies and planning.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. So the SDF work currently sits in the Safety and Resilience Committee already. So we propose to keep that there alongside those other longer term work programs. But it's just the mitigation activities that we've got would report through regional leadership.
So what are the decision-making processes here? What decisions would this be making, if any?
Well, I mean, that partly is
That's about delegation.
about delegations, so currently.
But what would they be anyway?
Yep, so currently, if they stayed as they currently are, it would be receiving, information for noting, the recommendations of things like the engagement framework, that came to regional leadership for decision making. Communication strategy would come to regional leadership committee. So there's, we bought the framework of the comms strategy, last year. That'll come back. Governance, so decision making about remuneration, around other governance related things that sometimes meeting schedules, other things like that would come to that committee. And the other thing we've left in there is the overarching strategic directions, so that peak strategic directions piece, and monitoring and evaluating that peak strategic directions piece. So that would come through this committee. But what we've proposed is putting the more functional strategies into a strategy and planning committee. So things like the biodiversity strategy and the air strategy would go to strategy and planning, but strategic directions as a peak document would come here, because it's not just environment, it covers all of the activities.
Elliot?
Yeah, sorry, and just on that climate change stuff still, I'm just wondering, does it make sense to split our mitigation reporting from the broader climate change strategy and that mitigation stuff that sits under there? Like, would we not be getting that reporting through the climate strategy reporting that would be getting presumably now through a different committee?
Yeah, it's a good point, Elliot. And I think this is one that probably we haven't given huge consideration to it. So we'd need to consider whether the climate strategy goes through the environmental, the policy and what are we calling it? The strategy and planning committee. Yeah, so I guess we hear that there's questions around that. So we'll need to go away and do some more thinking about where it best sits.
Yeah.
Probably my answer.
Yeah, okay, cool. Because I think the climate strategy, it could definitely sit in either regional leadership or that strategy and planning, which maybe makes more sense there. But I just think all of our climate stuff should probably come under the same roof, because I think that's sort of the point of the strategy, I guess. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
What are you calling this one?
It's currently called regional leadership.
So
Oh, right.
compared to regional leadership in our long-term plan, it is really different. It's much more constrained, and it's not going to be necessarily obvious to the community that it's quite different, because we're really clear in our regional leadership and our long-term plan that it covers governance and community engagement, which just does in part, but it's also regional planning and it's regulatory.
And I guess that's the tension about whether we organise, whether we're looking at the foundation of committees being the long-term plan structure or the GM structure, because they're currently.
No, so it's a naming now
Just call
that
it
I'm
something different.
just call it something different.
Yeah.
If it's not going to align, then don't.
Don't make a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could call it community and partnerships committee, or we could call it
That would
governance.
be really good. Not partnership and community.
Public name and competition.
Okay.
Would you like staff to make a recommendation on name, or do you have views? Yep.
Let's move on.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, so
We'll critique it when it comes back.
Yeah.
like that, so we know we'll put a new name in there. Finance committee, we haven't, no change. We have proposed one small change for audit and risk, is that we just broaden out health and safety reporting to be people and safety reporting, because audit and risk is receiving a quarterly report on people and safety. And safety. So then we get to a potential committee called Strategy and Planning Committee. Now, for the purposes of this, we have kept the iwi representatives on this committee, but I guess that's something that will need to be factored in, as this, depending on what next steps look like, is engaging with the other members of this committee around changes to terms of reference and what that looks like. And so the main changes based on feedback before lunch and earlier thinking, is to take out the science from the Science and Policy Committee and bring in more focus on that strategy, policy and planning. So you'll see we've taken out Biosecurity Act and the appropriate science and performance monitoring from the purpose. And then in terms of areas of responsibility, just split it up into policy and planning. So the black ones are the ones that were already there, and then the red ones red and green ones are new. So those bottom 3 have come from the Regional Leadership Committee, or bottom 4. The 1, 2, 3. The 4th point around the RPS was that we didn't actually have a specific term of. There was no committee that actually had ongoing RPS appeals, reviews and amendments in its terms of reference. So that is trying to tidy up that loose end. And same thing around oversight of plan effectiveness would be a new one too, in that terms of reference, to try and bring together that end-to-end planning process, I guess. And then the strategy piece would be strategy development related to the environment, with a question mark about climate change, which we'll go away and think about. And then also the link of oversight of environmental strategies, implementation and effectiveness. This used to sit in the Environmental Implementation Committee, but I think on reflection, the group that signs off the strategy should then be looking at how that strategy is being implemented and how effective it is, and leaving the Environmental Delivery Committee to be looking at it at a more environmental project level, rather than that higher level strategy piece.
I'll just touch maybe just briefly on that evaluation piece. So we have talked at previous committees around our review of outcomes. So we do a whole lot of work, but we don't necessarily look back and they sort of have a look at what the effectiveness of that work is what we have set out to do, actually achieving what we had hoped it would. So the way that these are now looking to be structured is that the setting of the strategy or the plans and the evaluation sits within a committee, and then there's a committee that actually deals with the doing, which is your delivery and your science and resilience. So this one here needs to both set it, but also has a really important role to do the evaluation, and is what we set out to do, making a difference in the way we thought it would. And having much more of a focus on that. So we're actually completing that cycle and then obviously plugging that back into the next update of whatever that strategy, policy or plan might be. So trying to split the delivery out so we can talk about what we're doing and make sure that we are delivering as we are either required to by statute or we've committed to do through a annual long-term plan, but making sure we have a much stronger focus on the evaluation of how we're doing.
Very good.
Yeah. Outputs and outcomes are different.
Oh, so that's right. So this is outcomes versus the doing is the outputs that we still need to keep an eye on, but we've been, rightly challenged around the table to do a bit more around outcomes.
And I guess one weird note about this committee is what had dropped off our working version was that council had started training and did provide a delegation to the Regional Leadership Committee around the FDS work with DCC. So that's always sat in the Regional Leadership Committee. We've just proposed transferring that down to the Strategy and Planning Committee.
Is it both QLDC and DCC or just DCC?
Just says DCC in the online version. But if we need to put QLDC in, so it's just an existing transfer of that delegation.
I'm getting confused, and I'm sometimes a pedant for wording. So the first one under regional leadership, whatever you're going to call it now, was strategic directions, and yet the strategy comes into this, and then you talk about plans. And I'm just wondering whether we have to be really clear what is strategic and what is a plan, and whether they sit, and it's not a hierarchy so much, but this one, you talk about strategy again, and it is quite confusing. I think
and so we can give that further work. I guess what we're thinking is that, so like the biodiversity strategy, the air strategy, if we were doing a coast strategy, they would come through the strategy and planning committee. The strategic directions as the peak overarching vision goals for the organisation we've proposed keeping it in regional leadership, because it is slightly different. It's not just environment, it covers a whole lot of different outcomes. And so it just leaves this committee as more
I think there's a lot in
the
this
functions specifically, but maybe it's an artificial distinction, and if the feeling is that it would be better to have strategic directions in here as well, we can consider that.
Well, no, I just think this is getting so many things added to it. It's a really big committee. We haven't actually stripped out much and we're not making them a particularly even workload.
And some of that, I guess, is, you know, if you look at the air work as example, we've got the air plan and the air strategy going through in parallel. That would be slightly awkward if the air plan was reporting into this committee and the air strategy was reporting into the regional leadership committee.
I wouldn't underestimate the volume of science reports that's
Yeah.
come through this committee previously. You think about some of the agendas we have.
Yeah.
You know, there's a significant amount of where I appreciate we're adding in. It's a big committee, you know. But planning, strategic planning is what we should be doing a lot of. But in terms of are we taking enough out to balance what's going in? I you know, thinking back on agendas, I think that a lot of those agendas have been science dominated with those states and Scott's work program, state of the environment reporting and that sort of thing. So I think it does balance when you think about how much science used to go through this.
Okay, cool.
Just on that discussion, I'd have thought the overall strategic directions would sit with council rather than the committee. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I guess that's the rationale for, I guess, why it's sat in regional leadership is the iwi representative at regional leadership level that's not been at the council level, but that's not to say that you know, I mean, these are all things that the council needs to think about. And I guess the delegations come into that as well. You might say that regional leadership committee could develop the strategic directions and consultation, but council approves and endorses and adopts.
That's right.
And I suppose it's like having the long-term plan and finance. We actually don't approve it, and we're just a mechanism to get the work done on it. That's the way I'd look at it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, any other feedback on this one? Doug's
Doug's
just made the point that we could say, rather than strategy development related to the environment, we could say development of specifics, you know, of specific strategies, so it's just clearer.
Can you go back up to stop? So I think I missed something at the start.
One thing.
Sure, we're not approving these today. So
Yeah.
you'll get another shot at them.
Yeah, well,
Council
it wasn't delegated to this workshop.
Basically putting all the policy and the strategy built ahead of the policy in the one committee. Just taking an overarching ORC Inc. big strategy. This is just like your policy and what your policy is informing, which is the specific strategies. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Yep. And just going back to what we would like the current committee, it is pretty busy. There are a lot of science papers, but we tend to have science, we tend to be like science would have a whole session and then policy would have another one, yeah.
Okay, shall we get going?
So the next, that leads us to the environmental implementation or environmental delivery committee, proposed a wee rename there. And we'd need to just rework that purpose a little bit more, but the key things that would come in would be the regulatory reporting. So that would, the stuff that was in regional leadership committee. But we've also just narrowed, and what's come out is that strategy implementation. So the terms of reference used to talk about biodiversity strategy implementation, but we've reframed that to be the project delivery. So the projects that will come out of those bigger strategies would sit in this environmental delivery committee, but the strategy implementation and effectiveness and evaluation itself would sit back in the strategy committee, and just added in just clarity around oversight of ORC delivered environmental projects. So things like Takapupu and the other reporting that you've been getting over the last couple of years, just making that clear that that sits here.
So we might have to do a wee bit of work on, just when you got your strategy committee doing the evaluation work of your implementation committee. So we just have to work how that works together.
Yeah, well, I think the strategy committee would be looking at the overarching, this was our, these were this was the year one action plan for that strategy. These things have been achieved, these things weren't achieved, this is how we're monitoring the effectiveness of it. This would be, the biodiversity might be a project A,
Or
project B.
targeted, yeah.
It would be that.
Yeah.
Or targeted. Yeah. Any feedback on that one?
If my straw man did gain feet, and that, I mean, it would be good to have a community outcomes, community work outcomes. It could be a reporting in from the community of environmental delivery. It doesn't have to be funded or from us. It could, I'm not quite sure, and I'm just putting it out there somewhere. I think we should be encouraging that relationship. I just don't know where it is because we haven't got to
This
the
would,
yet.
this would be the right one.
Yeah,
You could call it community feedback or
yeah,
something
or,
like
yeah.
And this is where, those
but
those other projects have reported in
Yeah,
previously.
yeah.
that. It would be environmental feedback.
Yeah. And they may introduce other ideas. Actually, I think they've generally gone to council, not to this committee in the past. I could be
I
wrong.
think during the room, because the two or three groups that formally report come into.
Oh, they
this.
formally report. No, I'm talking about the non-formal. So I think when the Southern Sanctuary, they usually go to council rather than the different. Yeah.
So when we get, either we get approached or we're speaking to groups to encourage them to come, we will either look for, well, first of all, look for the most relevant committee for them to attend.
Mhm.
And if that is either a whole cycle or one, they'll be waiting, 2 months, 3 months. But there's a council meeting coming up, we'll shift them to council if the agenda allows it. So try and make sure the timing works for them. And ideally get it to the right committee, which would be this one. But if it doesn't work, they'll be waiting too long. There's space in council, then, we'd just be flexible to make sure we can fit them in.
Yeah, so I just want, it should be just reporting on environmental activity initiatives, community feedback, because we probably actually really want to hear from our catchment liaison people on that, what Noslam's doing or what Te Ako
That's at the
Toto
top.
is doing, if they have, yeah.
That's at the top.
We don't want to rely on the community. I wouldn't have that as a KPI anywhere, that the community has to hear, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't make them come.
No, it's a place that they can do it.
Yeah, but that doesn't say that.
I'll pop a question mark, we could do some.
Yeah, I agree with what you're trying to achieve.
We can tie that up.
So receive reporting, just like the bullet above it.
Any other feedback on that proposed committee? Okay, and then
Just reporting from staff and community.
that would leave, with the changes we've already talked about, that would then filter down to a science and resilience committee. That would have its existing areas of responsibility, and then the science, I'll just ignore that climate one. The existing science reporting and state of the environment monitoring, analysis and reporting. So while it doesn't look like much, as Tom's flagged, that would be quite a lot to add in there, so we need to work on that.
Elliot, you asked a question online around science communication. It would sit in here in terms of the information we're reporting. How are we sharing that with our community? So I just saw that pop up in the earlier session, but there should be something when and Tom's already started it with the team, when we're bringing science reports through, there's effectively a piece that sits with it to say what additional work have we done, like the posters Scott worked on with the museum on lizards and other things like that. That will filter through this as well. Obviously, we'll have input from comms and from others, but it needs to sit with the science information.
That's awesome. I was just wondering, does that follow through like all the way to the user seeing it, I guess, like the endpoint? Because we see the posters and then they look super cool, but then like in terms of reporting, are those posters going to schools? Are they being put up here? Are they being taken to these events and stuff? Or would that sit more under the comms side of things?
So the team that are producing the papers are leading the kind of or in the material, or leading the distribution of that material, and whether that be through enviroschools or comms activities or sharing online and all that sort of stuff. But they're primarily responsible for ensuring all of that's happening, and often the scientists responsible are getting called in for outreach programs and learning experiences with other groups. So that's kind of how it's at. The science team are still responsible for ensuring that material is one, completed, and then two, distributed appropriately and shared appropriately.
Awesome, thanks.
This committee is probably going to be with a more very busy committee because it's pretty much a whole resilience committee plus the science one added to it, really. So it's probably one that we're just going to be, but that's where and there's a lot of work in that resilience space as well. So it's an area that probably, whether we need to be splitting it, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's back to the question Kevin asked before, even before the break or just after the break. This one is big.
Yeah.
We just chatted about it in the break in terms of that agenda management and just keeping an eye on it. And look, as with anything, if it's not quite right, then we need to first of all check the agenda we're setting and how much time we're giving it. And then if we end up not being able to get through everything, we might just have to come back and have a look at how we do that.
Okay.
But yeah.
I'm not sure that this is open for discussion, and I presume it's discussion with mana whenua, but I would have thought that an iwi work at least on this one would be appropriate, but that's discussion with them separate.
This concept needs to happen here first. You'll remember that committees and delegations was referred to in the totality audit feedback from mana whenua. So, and we've committed to report through mana to mana. So we'll have to go back and have a conversation about this with mana to mana, and obviously there's existing representatives that could carry through, but there may be an interest in with slight changes to these committees in terms of representation on other committees. So it needs to go back.
And whether it needs words somewhere of te ao Māori, I don't much all the times. Yeah.
Okay, they were the key changes, I guess, following the discussion. But one thing we've just highlighted as potentially worth a discussion, not necessarily now, but in the future, is just if we're packaging all our planning functions, policy and planning functions under the strategy and planning committee, there's a couple of functions in the public and active transport committee around the regional public transport plan and inputs to the RLTP that Anita will be able to talk to way better, but we just wanted to flag these. I don't know if you want to talk to that or.
I guess I was just trying to think about how to reduce duplication. So I know that the RLTP goes to RTC for adoption and then to council, but it also I think goes through PATC. And then the RPTP, I'm not sure if it goes to RTC or not because it's my first one and we're just in the process now. So there is a bit of a difference between what they do and whether there's a difference between the strategic planning stuff, so your RLTP and your RPTP, and the operational transport stuff, so your network reporting and timeliness and those sorts of things. Just in terms of what was Alexa's comment, I think, just about those two committees and what they're doing. So really just, I guess, some thoughts or some opportunities, or we just leave them as they are, given the RTC has the statutory functions.
I think it works really well feeding in. I think having us focused on transport rather than planning, it works well to have that as a separate topic because it's, and the RTC is by its very nature, because it's got all the TAs involved, far too hard to, I mean, as long as we're bringing the papers, which is an improvement, a vast improvement to the table, then I think it would be too complex to try and do them together anyway. But I think transport is far better as a single committee than trying to wrap it up into planning.
So what up? Is that what you're saying? Keep it as
Keep it
it's
as-
written there.
That's personally my view.
Okay, I think that, and yeah, CDM committee, we've proposed to be, any changes to that, so that they're the kind of key things that would, I guess, build that alignment with the new structure.
So, so next steps then.
So council obviously is decision maker around committee structure, so if you would like us to, we can go away and write a paper and tidy this document up and bring it back to council for consideration. At probably the March, we're probably not quite enough time, but we could see how we go, but that would be the next step, and I guess there's some, I think before then we'd want to have a conversation with the iwi appointees and the appointee to audit and risk, just to let them know that this paper is coming and that there has been some discussions on this. And I guess you just incorporate into that paper what next steps in terms of engagement might be, particularly around the iwi representation. And then the delegations next steps.
Yeah, I think where we arrived by consensus was, let's get the new committee structures set up. Let's get GMs and chairs to actively look at what's coming through with an eye on, well, if we had delegated decision making, would it have been a big deal or not? And would it have, would it have aligned with some of those principles we were talking about in terms of freeing up time without reducing transparency in clarity, and authorize them to then, and maybe you do a review in 6 months and see where, as a matter of practicality, yeah, there were things that if we delegated, we agreed at the committee level that we should go and seek delegations from council, and it wouldn't, impinge on council's accountability or council's visibility on big decisions. Kate?
Sorry, I think there's one layer, and we've got the words in there now at the bottom here, appoint working groups. Sorry. First, referring to an email that Lex just sent us, I'm just wondering whether somewhere under PAT we should have something about overview of the effectiveness of school bus routes, or the problems that may arise because of school bus routes or something. We just need to have that on our agenda. I think it's helpful too, because as I pull out, we're obviously having issues.
So we do have policies in the RPTP around provision of bus services, and at the moment we don't do it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but it's the wording I haven't got right, but I think something, the purview of the changes, understanding or reporting on the changes to other commercial or educational services. I don't know. It's not something, but anyway. Sorry, the other point I want to make is working groups. I don't know that we want to have working groups, or we have actually used them at all. But we have started setting up liaison groups, and the first one being on the Tairi, and I'm wondering under the science and resilience one, and possibly under here, having liaison groups. I mean, I think Queenstown and or a Dunedin liaison group on buses would be really helpful on some items, and I'm just flagging out there that I'd rather that than a working party, because I think it's something that's a lot easier to manage than the expectations. What does, but yeah.
Yep, well, let us do some thinking on that, because that's, there's significant resourcing that comes with those groups. So I think maybe recommending formation of liaison groups to council if we're being consistent and we're taking that position on not delegating things and allowing council to make those final decisions. So yeah, I mean, you're right, we have gone down the path of liaison groups based on feedback from council, and we've said the tidy flood and drainage will be sort of the first one, and there's other options in the flood and drainage schemes, but it does run into public transport and then potentially into other areas. But so we'll just have a think about it.
Yeah, no, just raising it again.
Okay, is that enough from a next steps point of view for you guys to get going as council? Not council, I was looking at Amanda then. And is council happy that will progress this in a way that you're comfortable and confident with?
So as part of the review, you'll come up with a new purpose for these, because the purpose in these documents is really important, because that's where your delegations are based. So if you're coming up with renewed purposes for these groups, that's going to make our delegation process easier. Yeah, we're doing that.
Okay, I think that's good progress, and I think gives a good clear steer to staff, and we can crack on now and bring that back. Thank you for saying March. Okay,
And just to be clear, in the interim, status quo, so there's a round of committee reports already being drafted. Most of you will have had catch-ups with James, or some of you will have, the ones that have committees coming up soon. So we won't assume this change is happening. We will continue to write reports and touch base with the co-chairs under the current terms of reference. And if and when that decision is made at a later date, we'll work on a transition and whatever we need to do. So otherwise, it's just we've got everything in the calendar in terms of committee meetings and that, so we'll just roll on as though nothing's changing until it does.
great. Well, I think that's all we need to do for now, and wrap up this workshop. And I think you have been successful in bringing forward the next item. So thanks very much. Get out of the way.
Elliot and Alexa will just stay in the same meeting.
The same link. Oh, is that all right from a recording perspective?
Yeah, I'm just gonna stop. Are you ready?
What time?